The night Abigail learned that love could break was the night the plate shattered against the kitchen wall. She was 10 years old, sitting at the dining table pretending to finish her homework while her parents' voices rose like a storm tearing through the house. Joanna's voice trembled with exhaustion, Mike's voice burned with anger, and between them stood a child who didn't understand why the people who once laughed together now spoke like enemies. The argument started the way it always did: money, late nights, suspicion, unspoken disappointments, but it never ended the same way. This time it ended with silence. A heavy, choking silence that told Abigail something had shifted forever. Mike grabbed his car keys and walked out. Joanna sank to the floor. Abigail didn't cry. She just stared at the broken plate and wondered how something whole could become pieces in seconds. Days turned into weeks, and the fighting didn't stop. It simply changed form. Instead of shouting across the living room, they whispered threats behind closed doors. Instead of angry words at dinner, there were icy silences that froze the air. Abigail began to shrink inside herself. At school, she stopped raising her hand. At night, she pressed her pillow over her ears to block out arguments. She learned how to read moods the way other children read books. She knew when Mike's jaw tightened that another fight was coming. She knew when Joanna washed dishes too aggressively that tears were near. The house no longer felt like home. It felt like a battlefield. One evening, Joanna called Abigail into the bedroom. Her eyes were red, but her voice was calm in a way that scared Abigail more than yelling ever had. She said, "Daddy and I are going to live in different houses." Abigail nodded like she understood, but inside her chest something collapsed. She asked if she had done something wrong. Joanna pulled her close and said no, but the child's mind had already decided that maybe if she had been quieter, smarter, better, they would still love each other. The divorce arrangements began like a business transaction. Lawyers, documents, schedules, custody discussions that reduced Abigail to weekends and weekdays. Mike wanted shared custody. Joanna wanted stability. Neither realized their daughter was listening from the hallway, absorbing every word like poison. She heard phrases like primary guardian and financial support and best interest of the child, and she wondered why no one asked what she wanted. When Mike moved into a small apartment across town, Abigail visited for the first time. The place smelled unfamiliar. The couch was new. The walls were bare. Mike tried to smile, tried to make it fun, bought her ice cream and let her stay up late watching movies, but there was an emptiness there that no sugar or laughter could fill. She noticed he cried quietly when he thought she was asleep. She pretended not to see. Back at Joanna's house, things weren't easier. Joanna worked longer hours now. She was tired, stressed, constantly on edge. Sometimes she snapped at Abigail for small things, spilled juice, unfinished homework, and immediately apologized, but the damage lingered. Abigail began having nightmares. She dreamed of being in the middle of a tug-of-war, her parents pulling her arms in opposite directions until she felt like she would split in half. She started wetting the bed again, something she hadn't done in years. Embarrassed, she hid the sheets and washed them secretly. She didn't want to be another problem. School became unbearable. When classmates talked about family vacations or parents cheering at football games, Abigail smiled politely and stayed silent. She stopped inviting friends over because she didn't know which version of her life to explain. The two-house routine made her feel like she lived two separate lives, and in neither did she fully belong. One afternoon during a custody exchange in the driveway, Mike and Joanna started arguing again. It was supposed to be quick, drop off, polite greeting, goodbye, but resentment has a way of erupting without warning. Voices rose. Accusations flew. Abigail stood between them holding her backpack. She begged them to stop. They didn't hear her. That was the moment something inside her hardened. That was the moment she stopped believing they would ever choose peace over pride. As months passed, the divorce was finalized. Papers were signed. Rings were removed. Friends chose sides. Joanna tried therapy but quit after 2 sessions, saying it was too expensive. Mike dated briefly, then stopped when Abigail refused to speak during visits. The little girl who once loved drawing family portraits now drew houses with cracked windows and rain pouring from dark clouds. Teachers called home about her declining grades. Joanna blamed Mike for the emotional instability. Mike blamed Joanna for creating tension. Neither realized their daughter felt invisible. One night, Abigail overheard Joanna on the phone saying, "I gave him everything. I sacrificed my dreams for this marriage." The words pierced her. She wondered if she too was part of that sacrifice. Later that week, she heard Mike telling a friend, "She turned my daughter against me." That hurt just as much. She didn't belong to either narrative. She was just a child trying to survive a war she didn't start. Her 13th birthday came quietly. No joint party. No shared celebration. 2 separate cakes on 2 separate days. 2 versions of happy birthday. She smiled in pictures, but her eyes told a different story. That night in her room at Joanna's house, she wrote in her diary that she felt like luggage passed between airports. She wrote that she wished she could disappear so they would finally stop fighting about her. She didn't mean it fully, but the thought scared her. The trauma didn't look dramatic. It looked like silence. It looked like isolation. It looked like a teenager who flinched when voices got loud. It looked like someone who struggled to trust love because she had seen how quickly it could dissolve. Years passed. The anger between Joanna and Mike cooled into cold indifference. They spoke only about schedules and school fees. They attended events separately, sitting on opposite sides of auditoriums. Abigail graduated high school without either parent standing next to the other. When she gave her valedictorian speech, she spoke about resilience in storms and learning to rebuild after destruction. Joanna cried. Mike clapped the loudest. But neither fully understood that the strength she spoke about had been forged in their conflict. The real breaking point came when Abigail, now 17, finally exploded. During another tense pickup exchange, she shouted, "Stop using me to hurt each other." The words stunned them into silence. Tears streamed down her face as years of bottled pain spilled out. She told them about the nightmares, the bedwetting, the loneliness, the guilt. She told them how she felt responsible for their unhappiness. She told them she didn't need perfect parents, just peaceful ones. Joanna covered her mouth in shock. Mike stepped back as if struck. For the first time, they saw the full weight of what their battles had done. In that driveway, under a fading sunset, the 3 of them stood in the wreckage of a marriage and the fragile remains of a family. Healing didn't happen overnight. Apologies were awkward. Conversations were difficult. Therapy began again, this time together as co-parents. It was messy and uncomfortable, but it was a start. Abigail learned that trauma doesn't disappear just because time passes. It lingers in reflexes and fears. But she also learned that confronting pain is the first step toward freedom. Joanna learned that her anger had blinded her to her daughter's silent suffering. Mike learned that winning arguments meant nothing if he lost connection with his child. They would never be the family they once were, but slowly, carefully, they began to build something different. Something quieter. Something kinder. And though the plate had shattered years ago, Though the house had once felt like a battlefield, Abigail began to understand that broken things do not always stay broken. Sometimes, with effort and humility, they can be pieced together into something new. Not perfect, not the same, but strong enough to hold love again.